Minute. If you couldn't guess, it's nearly President's Day, and in honor of George Washington, I'm wearing this 18th century wig. And let me tell you, it really itches. I don't know how he managed to get through it, but that's probably why he's such an unhappy face in this dollar bill. We have a lot of myths about Washington. Most of us by now know that Sherry's tree story was completely made up. You know the story, Washington, a little boy, he chops down the tree, his father says, "Who did this?" And Washington says, "I cannot tell a lie, I did it with my axe." That story was completely fabricated by a biographer who didn't even know Washington. It came much later on. The sad part of that is the real Washington, the young Washington, is a fascinating character. Here are 3 stories you probably never heard in your school books growing up. First, when Washington was 16, he went off into the woods of Virginia for the first time in his life. He settled down at night, took off his clothes. That's right, he slept in the buff, no pajamas, and he woke up in the middle of the night because he was being eaten alive by bed bugs. Threw on his clothes and decided from then on he would always sleep next to the fire when he was in the woods. A few years later, Washington went out into the wilderness again, this time on a serious mission to deliver a diplomatic letter. On his way back to Virginia, he and his companion had to build a raft across an icy river. They plunged into the water halfway across the river, both got soaking wet, and had to spend a night in freezing wet clothes. Probably could have died of frostbite, and that would have been the end of George Washington's story. And the third story is really interesting. It's Washington when he was 22, in charge of a group of Virginia militiamen, in command of men in the military for the first time in his life. He attacks some Frenchmen in the woods. The Frenchmen are massacred. Washington and his men are then chased down by a large French army. He's forced to surrender for the first and only time in his career and sign what amounts to a murder confession. That's right, George Washington confessed to murder. It's one of the stories that the textbooks leave out, but it's an interesting story of the real person behind the myth and the marble statues. And that's why I love history. It's about real people. Happy President's Day.